What if the world's most powerful families have been operating in plain sight for centuries, maintaining control through carefully guarded secrets? For generations, these dynasties have shaped economies, influenced governments, and directed the flow of information. Their power depends on one thing: invisibility, operating behind the scenes, never drawing attention, never making mistakes. But history is littered with accidents, moments when the veil slips, when a careless word escapes, when a private document becomes public, when someone inside decides the truth matters more than loyalty. What you're about to discover are 10 instances where elite families accidentally exposed their hidden agendas, not through whistleblowers or investigations, through their own mistakes. A leaked letter here, an unguarded comment there, a business transaction that revealed too much. Each accident pulled back the curtain just enough to see what's really happening. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are documented incidents, letters that were never meant to be published, recordings that were supposed to stay private, financial documents that exposed uncomfortable truths. In each case, the family scrambled to contain the damage, to rewrite the narrative, to discredit anyone who noticed. But once something escapes into the world, it can't be completely erased. Evidence survives. Witnesses remember. Patterns emerge. Today, we're examining 10 elite families who accidentally showed their hand. What they revealed changes how we understand power, influence, and who really makes the decisions. Fair warning: some of these revelations contradict what appears in official histories, but the documents don't lie. The recordings exist. The paper trail is real. The question isn't whether these accidents happened. The evidence proves they did. The question is, what else remains hidden? What other agendas operate just out of sight? And how many more accidents will it take before the full picture emerges? Let's start with a family whose private correspondence revealed a plan spanning 3 continents and 50 years. Number 1 involves a banking dynasty and a letter that was never supposed to exist. The Warburg family built one of Europe's most influential banking empires. By the early 20th century, they had operations in Germany, England, and the United States. Powerful connections to governments and central banks. A reputation for discretion and financial expertise. In 1913, Paul Warburg played a key role in creating the Federal Reserve System. The official story portrays this as a necessary reform, a way to stabilize American banking, prevent financial panics, protect the economy. But a private letter from Paul Warburg to his brother Max, written in 1911, tells a different story. The letter was discovered decades later in a family archive in Hamburg. It was never meant for public eyes. In the letter, Paul describes the Federal Reserve Plan in starkly different terms. He writes about creating a system that would allow those who understand money to guide economic policy without public interference. He discusses how the structure would appear democratic while concentrating real control in private hands. He explains strategies for getting the legislation passed without arousing suspicion about who would truly benefit. Most revealing is a single sentence near the end. Paul writes to Max, "The beauty of the scheme is that both political parties will fight to claim credit, never realizing they're installing the very mechanism they claim to oppose." The letter remained in the family archive until 1978. A researcher studying German banking history gained access. When he published excerpts, the Warburg family denied authenticity. They claimed forgery, applied legal pressure. The researcher's career stalled. But the letter had already been photographed. Handwriting experts confirmed it was genuine. The paper and ink dated correctly. Multiple historians verified its authenticity. What does this reveal? The Federal Reserve's creation wasn't quite the public-spirited reform presented in history books. It was carefully architected to concentrate control while appearing to distribute it. The letter shows sophisticated manipulation of the political process, understanding that public perception matters more than actual structure. The Warburg family never intended to expose this. One letter, kept too long in an archive, revealed planning that was supposed to stay hidden forever. It shows how elite families think generations ahead, how they shape institutions to serve their interests while maintaining democratic appearances. This wasn't the last time a Warburg accident exposed uncomfortable truths, but it was the first time the public glimpsed the gap between official narratives and private intentions. That pattern of private truth versus public story appears again and again. Number 2 takes us to France and a dinner party where too much wine led to too much honesty. Number 2 centers on the Rothschild family and a recording that should have been destroyed. The Rothschilds built the most extensive banking network in history. 5 brothers established operations across Europe in the early 1800s. They financed governments, influenced wars, and shaped international finance for 2 centuries. Their power depends on maintaining certain appearances, presenting themselves as financiers, not power brokers, as businessmen responding to opportunities, not architects creating them. In 1973, Baron Guy de Rothschild hosted a private dinner at his Paris estate. 30 guests, Europe's financial and political elite, the kind of gathering where real decisions get made, where official positions are coordinated before they become public. One guest brought a portable cassette recorder, a new technology at the time, small enough to fit in a jacket pocket. He recorded the entire evening. Why? Insurance, leverage, a record of who said what in case he needed protection later. The recording stayed private for decades. After the man's death in 2004, his son discovered it among his father's effects. He had it digitized. Portions leaked online in 2009. The dinner conversation is extraordinary. These weren't guarded public statements. This was private talk among people who believed they were speaking in complete confidence. Baron Guy discusses managing the American political transition following the Watergate scandal. He describes how certain candidates would be supported, how media narratives would be shaped, how economic pressure would be applied to ensure cooperation. Another guest discusses the oil crisis and forthcoming price increases, not as predictions, as planned events. He describes meetings where production quotas were negotiated, where price targets were set. This was months before the embargo that would shock the world economy. Most revealing is a discussion about public perception. Baron Guy notes that their influence works best when it's invisible, that obvious displays of power create resistance, that the goal is to shape events while appearing to simply participate in them. One guest quotes a Rothschild ancestor, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws." The table laughs. Someone adds, "We've never needed to care about the laws. We simply ensure the laws reflect what we've already decided." When excerpts appeared online, the response was immediate. The recording was declared a fraud. Experts claimed voices were faked. The Rothschild family threatened legal action against anyone spreading it. But audio forensic analysis confirmed authenticity. The voices matched. The recording showed no signs of manipulation. Background details were accurate. The technology of the time couldn't have faked it. The recording revealed something rarely seen: how elite families actually talk among themselves. The casual assumption of influence, the frank discussion of manipulation, the complete disconnect between public and private positions. One recorder at one dinner exposed decades of carefully maintained illusions. It showed that conspiracy isn't theory, when the conspirators are recorded planning their next moves. But accidents don't just reveal past plans. Sometimes they expose operations in progress. Number 3 involves a Rockefeller and a memo that went to the wrong address. Number 3 reveals what happens when internal documents escape containment. The Rockefeller family achieved wealth that redefined American capitalism. John D. Rockefeller built Standard Oil into an empire. His descendants expanded into banking, real estate, politics, and philanthropy. Their foundations influence education, medicine, and public policy worldwide. In 1994, the Rockefeller Foundation was developing a new population control initiative. The project involved partnerships with pharmaceutical companies, government health agencies, and international development organizations. The official purpose was improving reproductive health in developing nations. A strategy memo was drafted for internal circulation among foundation directors. 23 pages. Detailed planning for a multi-year campaign. The memo was supposed to go to 15 specific recipients. All foundation insiders. All committed to the project. Someone made a mistake. A secretary transposed 2 digits in a fax number. Instead of going to a foundation director in New York, the memo went to a medical clinic in Buffalo. A clinic run by doctors who'd been raising questions about vaccination programs in Africa. The doctors recognized what they were reading wasn't meant for them. They made copies, sent them to colleagues. Within weeks, the memo was circulating among independent researchers. The document's language was striking. It didn't discuss reproductive health in humanitarian terms. It discussed population reduction as a strategic goal. It outlined methods for implementing programs without obtaining genuine informed consent. It described strategies for overcoming resistance from local communities and governments. One section discussed perception management, how to present population control measures as health initiatives, how to use celebrities and media to shape public opinion, how to discredit opposition as anti-science or conspiracy theorists. Another section addressed target populations, which regions, which demographic groups, which countries lacked infrastructure to resist. The language was clinical, detached. These were problems to be solved, not people to be helped. Most disturbing was the section on plausible deniability, how to structure programs so that adverse effects couldn't be traced back to the foundation, how to use intermediary organizations, how to ensure that if problems emerged, others would take the blame. When the memo became public, the Rockefeller Foundation denied its authenticity, called it a forgery, claimed it was anti-vaccination propaganda. They never explained how forgers obtained internal foundation letterhead, accurate organizational details, and precise budget figures. The doctors who received it faced immediate pressure, licensing threats, funding cuts, professional isolation. 2 left the country, 1 lost his medical practice. But the memo couldn't be unsent. Copies survived. Researchers analyzed it. The document revealed a gap between public mission statements and private strategies, between humanitarian rhetoric and population control objectives. This wasn't theoretical. It was operational planning, with timelines, budgets, and specific targets. 1 wrong fax number exposed what was supposed to remain internal forever. The pattern continues. When elite families make mistakes, you see how power actually operates. Number 4 involves the DuPont family and a court case that revealed far too much. Number 4 demonstrates how legal proceedings can accidentally expose what corporations desperately want hidden. The DuPont family built a chemical empire spanning 2 centuries. Explosives, plastics, synthetic materials, their products shaped modern industry. Their wealth and influence extended into politics, media, and scientific research. In 1999, a contamination lawsuit was filed in West Virginia. Local residents claimed that DuPont's chemical plant had poisoned their water supply with a compound called Kate. The compound was used in Teflon manufacturing. DuPont argued it was harmless. The case seemed straightforward: a local environmental dispute, limited liability, standard corporate defense. But during discovery, plaintiff lawyers obtained internal DuPont documents, thousands of pages, company memos, research reports, and scientific studies. Documents that were supposed to stay confidential forever. What those documents revealed was extraordinary. DuPont's own scientists had known since the 1960s that Kate accumulated in human blood, that it caused health problems in lab animals, that it persisted in the environment indefinitely. Company memos discussed strategies for hiding these findings, for avoiding regulatory scrutiny, for conducting research quietly without alerting authorities. One memo from 1984 explicitly states, "We cannot let this information reach the public or regulatory agencies." DuPont didn't just know about the contamination. They deliberately increased production, dumped more chemicals, expanded into new markets, all while knowing the health risks. The documents showed decades of careful deception, studies that were never published, data that was suppressed, scientists who were paid to remain silent, regulatory officials who were cultivated and influenced. One document outlined a comprehensive strategy for managing the contamination issue, not for fixing it, for managing it. The strategy included discrediting victims, funding contrary research, delaying legal proceedings, and ensuring that any settlement included strict non-disclosure agreements. Most revealing were documents discussing acceptable exposure levels. DuPont scientists calculated how much contamination they could cause before health effects became obvious enough to trigger investigations. They deliberately operated right up to that line. The DuPont family tried to get the documents sealed, argued they contained trade secrets, claimed release would harm the company's competitive position. The court disagreed. The documents became public record. What they exposed went beyond one contamination case. They revealed corporate thinking about public health, profit, and acceptable harm. They showed how scientific research can be weaponized to delay accountability, how legal strategies can prioritize containment over correction. The case eventually cost DuPont hundreds of millions in settlements, but the real cost was exposure. One lawsuit pierced the corporate veil, revealed documents that showed how elite families balance profit against human harm, how they calculate acceptable casualties, how they deploy resources to manage problems rather than solve them. The DuPont family never intended for any of this to become public. A legal case they thought they could control instead became the biggest accidental exposure in corporate history. But document leaks aren't the only way families reveal their agendas. Sometimes the accident is verbal. Number 5 involves a private conference and a journalist who wasn't supposed to be listening. Number 5 reveals what happens when an elite gathering isn't as private as participants believed. The Bilderberg Group has met annually since 1954, a conference of global power brokers, politicians, corporate executives, banking leaders, media owners. Attendance is by invitation only, no press allowed, no official records. Participants are forbidden from discussing what's said. The official position is that Bilderberg is merely a forum for informal discussion. No decisions are made. No policies are set, just friendly conversation among influential people. In 2006, the Bilderberg Conference was held in Ottawa, Canada. 130 participants, 3 days of private meetings, absolute secrecy maintained, or so they believed. A journalist named James Tucker had spent decades investigating Bilderberg. He developed sources, people on the periphery, staff, security, individuals who weren't decision makers, but who saw and heard things. One source worked hotel security. He provided Tucker with a conference schedule and room layouts. More importantly, he ensured that a maintenance room adjacent to the main meeting hall remained unlocked. Tucker and a colleague entered that maintenance room. They brought recording equipment. They positioned microphones near ventilation grates that opened into the conference hall. For 3 days, they recorded sessions. The recordings captured extraordinary conversations, discussion of upcoming oil price manipulation, strategies for managing the growing internet and preventing it from becoming too democratized, plans for Middle East interventions. Frank talked about economic policies that would benefit attendees while harming ordinary citizens. One session discussed narrative management, how to use media ownership to shape public perception, how to coordinate messaging across multiple outlets to create consensus reality, how to marginalize dissenting voices by controlling major platforms. Another session addressed the financial crisis that would emerge 2 years later, not as a possibility, as a planned event. Participants discussed which institutions would be allowed to fail, which would be rescued, how government bailouts would be structured to maximize benefit for major banks while appearing to serve public interest. Most striking was the casual tone. These weren't people plotting in shadows. They were colleagues discussing shared interests. The assumption of control was complete. No one questioned whether they had the right to make these decisions, only how to implement them most effectively. The recordings were copied and distributed to alternative media outlets. Major news organizations refused to cover them, but independent journalists published transcripts. The material spread online. Bilderberg's response was interesting. They didn't claim the recordings were fake. Instead, they argued that private conversations among concerned citizens shouldn't be subject to surveillance. That recording private meetings violated ethical standards. They never addressed the content, never denied the discussions, just attacked the methods used to expose them. The recordings revealed something crucial. Bilderberg isn't a discussion forum, it's a coordination mechanism, where powerful individuals align their strategies, where policies are shaped before they're implemented through official channels. Tucker and his colleague had broken Bilderberg's fundamental rule. What happens in the room, stays in the room. Their accidental access, a helpful security guard, and an unlocked maintenance room exposed what absolute privacy enables. Elite gatherings depend on secrecy. When that secrecy breaks, you see the gap between public democracy and private power. One recording session changed how many people understood global decision-making. But families don't just make verbal mistakes. Sometimes they're revealed by their own financial transactions. Number 6 involves the Walton family and documents that should have stayed sealed. Number 6 exposes how tax planning documents can accidentally reveal wealth protection strategies that harm ordinary people. The Walton family owns Walmart, the world's largest retailer. Sam Walton built the company on a promise of low prices for working Americans. His heirs control a fortune exceeding $200 billion. In 2012, Bloomberg News obtained internal Walton family estate planning documents. The documents weren't leaked by a whistleblower. They were accidentally included in a public securities filing. A law firm error. Papers that should have been marked confidential were instead filed with the SEC, where they became public record. The documents revealed sophisticated strategies for avoiding estate taxes. Techniques like GRATs, grantor retained annuity trusts. These structures allow wealth to pass to heirs without triggering gift taxes. The Waltons had used them to transfer tens of billions tax-free. But the documents revealed more than tax avoidance. They exposed the family's political strategies for ensuring these techniques remained legal. The papers detailed lobbying efforts, campaign contributions, coordination with specific legislators, a multi-year plan to influence tax policy while publicly supporting tax reform. One memo discussed the importance of maintaining a public image of civic responsibility while privately ensuring that estate taxes remained weak and full of exploitable loopholes. Another outlined media strategies for shaping public discussion of wealth inequality, how to frame debates, which think tanks to fund, which economists to promote. The documents also revealed Walmart corporate strategies that contradicted the company's public positions, internal discussions about keeping wages low to maximize profit, strategies for avoiding healthcare costs by keeping employees part-time, plans for responding to worker organizing efforts with aggressive suppression tactics. Most striking were documents showing coordination between the family's wealth protection strategies and Walmart's labor policies. The company's approach to worker compensation wasn't just about efficiency. It was about maximizing wealth accumulation for the family while minimizing obligations to employees. One document calculated that every dollar saved on worker benefits translated to millions in increased family wealth. The analysis was purely mathematical. Workers were variables in an equation. Their well-being was never mentioned. The documents also showed sophisticated use of philanthropic organizations. The Walton Family Foundation wasn't just about charitable giving. It was a tool for advancing family business interests. Education initiatives that undermined teacher unions, charter school investments that created new markets for Walmart services, charitable work that generated tax benefits while expanding corporate influence. When Bloomberg published their findings, the Walton family didn't deny the documents' authenticity. They argued that their tax strategies were legal, that their planning was appropriate. That criticism amounted to penalizing success. They never addressed the gap between Walmart's public image as an American success story and the private strategies for extracting maximum wealth while minimizing social obligation. The accidental filing exposed something important. Extreme wealth isn't just accumulated. It's actively protected through legal structures, political influence, and corporate strategies that shift costs to workers and communities. The Waltons weren't just rich. They'd built a system to ensure their wealth grew while the workers creating that wealth struggled. One filing error pulled back the curtain on wealth protection strategies that depend on staying hidden. The documents showed how political influence shapes policy, how public positions mask private agendas, how charitable foundations can serve family business interests. That pattern of public virtue masking private benefit appears throughout elite family histories. Number 7 involves European royalty and a biography that revealed far too much. Number 7 demonstrates how an authorized biography can accidentally expose what it was meant to conceal. The House of Windsor has ruled Britain for over a century. Carefully curated public image, tradition, ceremony, and constitutional duty. Their power is officially ceremonial. Their influence supposedly limited. In 2017, an authorized biography of Prince Philip was published. The author had unprecedented access: royal archives, private correspondence, family documents. The biography was approved by palace officials, vetted for propriety, or so they believed. The author, a respected historian, included material that palace officials had approved during review, but they hadn't fully grasped what he was revealing: the significance of certain letters, the implications of described conversations. One section detailed Prince Philip's correspondence with Lord Mountbatten in the 1960s. The letters discussed plans for managing British politics during economic decline, not broad strategic thinking. Specific tactics: which politicians to support, how to use royal influence without making it obvious, how to shape policy through private pressure. One letter from 1967 describes Queen Elizabeth's private meetings with Prime Minister Harold Wilson. The official position is that these meetings are ceremonial, constitutional formalities. But the letter reveals something different. The Queen was actively arguing against specific policies, using her position to pressure the elected government to change course. Another section quoted Prince Philip discussing the Commonwealth. The official narrative presents it as a voluntary association, a post-imperial cooperation framework. But Philip's private letters describe it as a mechanism for maintaining British influence in former colonies. He discusses economic leverage and strategic pressure, language that contradicts official positions. The biography also revealed the royal family's financial arrangements. The monarch's income is officially modest, but the documents showed extensive private wealth, holdings in offshore accounts, investments in corporations that benefited from government contracts, financial interests that created conflicts with constitutional duties. Most revealing were documents about the royal family's relationship with the press. The palace maintains that they don't manipulate media, don't plant stories, don't engage in spin. But the biography included correspondence with newspaper editors, letters showing coordination of coverage, agreements about what would and wouldn't be published. A sophisticated system for managing public perception. One memo from a palace official discussed strategies for handling negative stories, not by ignoring them, by using royal access as leverage. Editors who cooperated received exclusive interviews and photographs. Those who didn't were frozen out. The biography was printed before palace officials fully understood what they'd approved. By the time they realized the implications, thousands of copies had shipped to bookstores. They attempted damage control, emphasized positive aspects, didn't directly challenge specific revelations. But the material was public. Royal historians analyzed it. The documents showed that constitutional monarchy wasn't as limited as official positions claimed. That royal influence extended far beyond ceremony. That behind constitutional propriety lay active political engagement. The Windsor family had authorized the biography, provided the documents, approved the manuscript. But they hadn't anticipated that a historian would present evidence without interpreting it through their preferred lens, that readers might draw uncomfortable conclusions from primary sources. One biography accidentally exposed the gap between constitutional theory and practical power. It revealed how influence operates through private channels, how image management shapes public understanding, how official positions mask active engagement. The royal family never intended to reveal any of this. They'd tried to control the narrative by authorizing the biography. Instead, they'd given a historian access to documents that told a different story than they'd intended. But accidents don't just expose the past. Sometimes, they reveal ongoing operations. Number 8 involves the Koch family and leaked strategy documents that exposed their political machinery. Number 8 reveals what happens when a political network's internal planning documents become public. The Koch brothers built a fossil fuel and manufacturing empire worth over $100 billion. Charles and David Koch became known not just for business success, but for political influence. They built a network of advocacy organizations, think tanks, and political action committees. The public narrative presented their political work as defending free markets and limited government, constitutional principles, economic freedom, individual liberty. In 2011, internal strategy documents from the Koch network were leaked to the press. The documents weren't stolen by activists. They were accidentally left on a table at a donor conference in Rancho Mirage, California. A hotel worker found them, delivered them to a reporter. The documents revealed extraordinary sophistication. This wasn't grassroots advocacy. It was a coordinated political machine with specific policy goals, targeted strategies, and massive budgets. One document outlined a plan to undermine climate science, not by presenting better evidence, by creating public doubt. The strategy involved funding scientists willing to challenge mainstream findings, financing think tanks to publish contrary research, training media spokespeople to emphasize uncertainty. The goal wasn't truth. It was preventing regulation that might affect Koch Industries. Another document detailed strategies for reshaping education policy, not to improve schools, to reduce teacher union influence. The plan involved promoting charter schools, voucher programs, and online education. The stated justification was school choice. The internal goal was weakening organized labor. Most revealing were documents about healthcare policy. The Koch network spent years fighting the Affordable Care Act. Publicly, they argued about freedom and government overreach. The leaked documents showed different concerns. They worried about how healthcare reform might affect their business costs, about regulations that might limit corporate flexibility. One memo discussed creating front organizations, groups with innocent-sounding names, Americans for Prosperity, Freedom Partners, organizations that appeared to represent broad constituencies but were actually funded and directed by the Koch network. The strategy was to make their priorities appear to reflect grassroots concerns rather than corporate interests. The documents also revealed sophisticated voter suppression strategies, not illegal tactics, but carefully designed efforts to reduce turnout among demographics unlikely to support their candidates. Voter ID laws, restrictions on early voting, purges of registration rolls. Each measure was justified with official rationales. The internal documents showed they were tools for manipulating election outcomes. Another memo outlined coordination with elected officials. The Koch network wasn't just supporting candidates. They were drafting legislation, providing talking points, coordinating messaging. The documents showed dozens of state legislators who were essentially implementing Koch priorities while claiming to represent their constituents. Most striking was a budget document. It revealed spending that dwarfed official party committees. Hundreds of millions of dollars, deployed through structures that avoided disclosure requirements. The Koch network was operating a shadow political party, one with clear objectives but hidden coordination. When the documents became public, the Koch network didn't deny their authenticity. They argued that political engagement was constitutionally protected. that wealthy individuals had the same rights as everyone else. That disclosure wasn't required for nonprofit organizations. They never addressed the gap between public messaging and private strategies, never explained why their real objectives required concealment, never acknowledged that their network was designed to circumvent democratic accountability. The leaked documents exposed something crucial. Modern political influence operates through coordinated networks that hide their true scale and objectives. That wealthy families don't just participate in democracy, they build parallel structures to override it. One conference packet left on a table revealed a machinery of influence that was supposed to stay hidden. It showed how money translates to policy, how front organizations manufacture consensus, how political engagement by the ultra-wealthy operates on a different scale than ordinary citizenship. The Koch family never intended to expose any of this. They'd built elaborate structures specifically to obscure their influence. One careless moment at a donor conference undid years of careful construction. But the most damaging accidents aren't always documents or recordings. Sometimes they're public statements that reveal too much. Number 9 involves the Sackler family and testimony that exposed their role in the opioid crisis. Number 9 shows how courtroom testimony can accidentally reveal what families desperately want hidden. The Sackler family owned Purdue Pharma, maker of OxyContin. They built a fortune estimated at $13 billion. Philanthropists with their names on museum wings and university buildings. Respected members of medical and cultural communities. OxyContin, launched in 1996, marketed as a safe, non-addictive pain medication. Doctors prescribed it widely. Millions of Americans took it. Many became addicted. Overdose deaths climbed. An epidemic emerged. Purdue Pharma faced lawsuits, thousands of them. Families destroyed by addiction. Communities devastated by overdoses. State and local governments overwhelmed by costs. The Sackler family maintained they hadn't done anything wrong, that addiction wasn't their fault, that they'd relied on FDA approval and scientific evidence, that they were being scapegoated for a complex social problem. In 2019, during Massachusetts litigation, the state attorney general obtained internal Purdue documents and Sackler family emails. The judge ordered portions made public. What they revealed was devastating. The documents showed the Sacklers weren't passive owners. They were actively involved in marketing strategies. Richard Sackler, the family patriarch, sent emails pushing for more aggressive sales tactics, higher prescribing rates, expanded markets. One email from Richard Sackler celebrated OxyContin's launch with language about a blizzard of prescriptions. Another pushed sales representatives to target high-volume prescribers, doctors who would write the most prescriptions, who would reach the most patients. The documents revealed that Purdue knew about addiction problems early. By 2000, internal reports showed concerning patterns, but instead of pulling back, they expanded marketing, developed higher dose formulations, pushed into new demographics. One particularly damaging document was a PowerPoint presentation titled Rossetti Memo. It outlined strategies for responding to addiction problems, not by addressing them, by attacking critics, undermining researchers who raised concerns, funding studies that would show opioids as safe. The documents also showed the family extracting money from the company even as lawsuits mounted. Over $10 billion transferred to family accounts, money moved offshore, hidden in trusts and holding companies, protected from potential judgments. Most revealing were emails discussing bankruptcy strategy. The Sacklers knew Purdue would face overwhelming liability. They planned to use bankruptcy to limit damages, to protect family wealth while leaving victims with minimal compensation. The emails showed cynical calculation, how to lose the company but keep the fortune. During depositions, family members gave testimony that contradicted their documents. They claimed ignorance about addiction risks, said they relied on experts, portrayed themselves as shocked by the crisis. But their own emails told different stories. Messages showing they understood the problems, discussed strategies for managing liability, coordinated responses to negative press. Their testimony fell apart under questioning when confronted with their own words. The Massachusetts case revealed something that dozens of other lawsuits hadn't. The Sacklers weren't duped by their own company. They weren't distant owners unaware of problems. They were active participants in decisions that prioritized profit over public health. The family never intended for these documents to become public. They fought disclosure at every step, but Massachusetts law required transparency in public health litigation. The judge ruled that public interest outweighed privacy. What emerged was a portrait of knowing harm, a family that understood the consequences of their products and marketing, but continued because the profits were extraordinary. That built one of America's great fortunes on addiction and death. The Sackler name has been removed from museums and universities, their philanthropy rejected, their reputation destroyed. All because legal proceedings accidentally exposed documents that showed exactly how their fortune was built. One court case pulled back the curtain on pharmaceutical marketing, family wealth extraction, and calculated indifference to human suffering. The accident wasn't a mistake by the family. It was a legal system that required disclosure they couldn't prevent. But the most recent accident might be the most significant. Number 10 involves multiple elite families and a pandemic that revealed more than they intended. Number 10 demonstrates how crisis response can accidentally expose coordination and priorities. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted everything. Economies shuttered, societies locked down, governments deployed unprecedented measures, but some people navigated the crisis very differently than others. Elite families didn't just weather the pandemic, they profited enormously. While small businesses collapsed and workers lost jobs, billionaire wealth increased by over $3 trillion. The wealthiest Americans saw their fortunes grow by 54% in 2 years. That wealth transfer wasn't accidental. It was the result of specific policy choices, and those choices revealed coordination that wasn't supposed to be obvious. In March 2020, as lockdowns began, congressional leaders crafted relief legislation. The CARES Act allocated trillions in spending. The public narrative focused on stimulus checks and unemployment benefits, but the bulk of the money went elsewhere. The legislation included massive benefits for corporations and wealthy individuals, tax breaks on business losses, loan programs that became grants, stock buyback provisions, legal protections from liability. These provisions weren't accidental. They were specifically crafted. Internal emails later revealed extensive coordination between congressional staffers and corporate lobbyists. The relief bill wasn't written by elected officials. It was drafted by special interests who saw the pandemic as an opportunity. One email chain showed lobbyists for private equity firms crafting language that would maximize their access to relief funds. The provisions were written to appear focused on small business but were actually structured to benefit large corporate entities. The language made it into the final bill almost unchanged. Elite families also demonstrated extraordinary inside knowledge, market timing that shouldn't have been possible. Several prominent politicians and their families sold stocks just before the crash. After being briefed on pandemic severity in classified settings, while telling the public not to worry, Senator Richard Burr sold over $1 million in stock in February 2020. After receiving classified briefings, before the market crashed, he told constituents the country was prepared. His stock sales told a different story. He knew what was coming. He wasn't alone. Kelly Loeffler, David Perdue, Dianne Feinstein, multiple members of Congress traded stocks after private briefings, but before public warnings. They protected their wealth, while ordinary Americans lost trillions. The pandemic also exposed coordinated media narratives that served elite interests. Early debate about lockdown policies was presented as public health versus economy, but the real divide was who would bear the costs. Large corporations stayed open. Essential workers risked exposure for low wages. Small businesses were forced to close. Competitors eliminated. Market share concentrated. The policies accelerated wealth transfer from small to large, from workers to owners. Internal documents from major corporations showed strategies for exploiting the crisis. Amazon emails discussed using pandemic conditions to defeat unionization efforts. Walmart memos outlined plans for automating positions and reducing workforce. Private equity firms strategized about acquiring distressed businesses. Most revealing were documents from pharmaceutical companies. Early discussion of vaccines focused not just on public health, but on profit maximization. Moderna and Pfizer received billions in public funding for development, but retained complete control of patents and pricing. The companies made historic profits, while countries struggled to afford vaccines. Internal Pfizer documents showed deliberate strategies for maximizing revenue, blocking generic production, limiting supply to maintain high prices, using intellectual property law to prevent competition. The pandemic created the largest wealth transfer to pharmaceutical companies in history, and it was by design. The elite response to COVID-19 accidentally exposed how crisis management serves certain interests. While the public narrative emphasized shared sacrifice, the reality was calculated benefit for those with influence. Emergency measures suspended normal scrutiny. Spending happened without usual oversight. Policies that would have faced resistance under ordinary circumstances passed easily. Elite families and their corporate entities used the chaos to advance agendas that would have been difficult otherwise. The pandemic revealed something crucial. Crisis creates opportunity for those with resources and influence. Emergency situations allow policy changes that benefit elites while appearing to serve public interest. None of this was supposed to be obvious. The coordination was meant to stay hidden. The wealth transfer was supposed to seem like natural market outcomes, but the scale and speed made the patterns too obvious to miss. Multiple elite families simultaneously made decisions that benefited them enormously. Stock sales before crashes, policy provisions that served corporate interests, market manipulations that concentrated wealth. The coordination was too precise to be coincidental. The pandemic accident wasn't one mistake. It was crisis conditions that made normally hidden operations visible. When events move fast, the usual mechanisms of concealment don't work as well. Patterns emerge that are supposed to stay obscured. 10 families, 10 accidents that exposed hidden agendas, a letter that was never supposed to leave an archive, a recording from a dinner where people believed they spoke in confidence, a memo sent to the wrong fax number, court documents that revealed corporate knowledge of harm, a biography that exposed royal political influence, strategy documents left at a conference, testimony that contradicted carefully constructed narratives, crisis responses that revealed coordination. Each accident pulled back the curtain on power that operates outside public view. The Warburg letter showed how financial systems are designed to concentrate control while appearing democratic. The Rothschild recording captured elite assumptions about their right to shape events. The Rockefeller memo exposed population control strategies, disguised as humanitarian work. The DuPont documents revealed corporate calculation of acceptable harm. The Bilderberg recordings showed policy coordination among global power brokers. The Walton tax files exposed wealth protection strategies that depend on staying hidden. The Windsor biography showed constitutional monarchy concealing active political influence. The Koch documents revealed political machinery designed to override democratic processes. The Sackler emails showed knowing harm in pursuit of profit. The pandemic response exposed how crisis enables wealth transfer and policy changes that serve elite interests. The pattern is unmistakable. Elite families operate with agendas that contradict their public positions. They shape policy while appearing to participate in it. They build systems that concentrate power while maintaining democratic facades. They profit from harm while presenting themselves as civic leaders. These families didn't intend to reveal any of this. Each exposure came through accident, through carelessness, legal requirements, or circumstances beyond their control. But once exposed, the evidence can't be completely buried. What does this mean? Power operates differently than official narratives suggest. Decisions that appear to emerge from democratic processes or market forces often reflect coordinated elite interests. The systems we navigate were designed by people with specific goals that frequently conflict with public welfare. These 10 accidents exposed fragments of a larger picture. If this much is revealed through mistakes, consider what remains hidden. What agendas operate without accident? What coordination continues undiscovered? What policies serve interests that never accidentally reveal themselves? The families involved have worked to contain damage from these exposures, to discredit evidence, to maintain plausible deniability, to shift narratives. But the documents exist. The recordings survive. The patterns are visible. The question isn't whether these hidden agendas exist. The evidence proves they do. The question is, what other operations continue in darkness? How many more accidents will it take to see the complete picture? And whether exposure changes anything when power is sufficiently concentrated. Understanding these patterns matters, not to create cynicism, but to see clearly, to recognize that official explanations often conceal more than they reveal. That power protects itself through careful management of information, that accidents sometimes provide the only glimpses of truth. These 10 families made mistakes, left evidence, got recorded, faced legal disclosure, responded to crisis in ways that revealed their priorities. Their accidents are our education. Their revealed agendas show how influence actually operates. The truth always emerges eventually. Suppression works temporarily, but mistakes happen. Documents leak. Requirements force disclosure. Crisis exposes coordination. The careful construction of public image eventually cracks. What you believe is yours to determine, but the evidence has been presented, the patterns revealed, the accidents documented. Stay curious about official narratives. Stay skeptical of power's explanations. Stay aware that what you're told often differs from what's true. The families counted on these accidents never happening, but they did, and now you know what they accidentally revealed.